Greetings, this is Doc Ock coming at you live and direct from Black Facts Headquarters Central this evening with another installment of Doc Ock at noon and 9. Now, if you were looking for us on Facebook today, you may have missed us. We were having some technical difficulties getting our feed up to Facebook, but we did get it on YouTube. So if you're seeing us now, check YouTube for the segment that you missed on A Passenger on the Pearl. So we did do that at noon. We did put up a new segment, but I don't know if everybody saw it or not. So if you missed it, look for it there, and we will get it up on Facebook as soon as possible. Ooh, excuse me. Twice. One more time, somebody's calling my name. Okay. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and deal with the real. We got our usual. Don't forget to give us a like and a thumbs up if you're looking at us on Facebook. And then go ahead and subscribe, if you haven't done that already, to our Tubular Black Facts channel. And in the meanwhile, we'll go ahead and do our proverb. Proverb for tonight is, let's see what we got here. Here we go. Oh yeah, I like this one here. Usitukane wakunga na uzazi ungalipo. Usitukane wakunga na uzazi ungalipo. Very simple message. Do not insult the midwives if you can still have more children. Don't insult the midwives. You also don't want to insult the people that are serving your food if you're getting ready to eat there. Best not to insult the people before they bring you the food. Okay. Chapter 19. Elizabeth Langdon. Portsmouth was a quaint and intimate New England shipping town with small streets and a passionate, hard-working citizenry. It was a place where Ona could hide, and provided she kept a low profile, she could buy whatever food she liked at the market with her earnings. She could repay the generosity of her host by bringing home turnips or a fish called striped bass. She could even begin to sew again, perhaps making some dresses for her host, and then eventually buying enough material and ribbons and buttons so that she could create elaborate gowns like the ones she used to make for Martha Washington. Freedom had been her first objective. Lifting herself up from a crippling, life-sapping poverty would be her second. Of course, Ona always knew she wasn't legally free. She never would be unless Martha Washington would agree to free her slaves. And Ona knew better than anyone else that Martha would never, ever do that. Ona was probably haunted by nightmares of the treatment of her siblings and nieces left behind at Mount Vernon. She probably could imagine the strong arms and greedy eyes of the violent slave catcher searching for her. The slave who'd had the audacity to flee the president of the USA. The good news was that Ona was establishing a solid reputation among her new townspeople. The bad news was that it turned out that the Langdons, who could have lived anywhere in New Hampshire, lived in Portsmouth too. Uh-oh. Senator John Langdon, the head of this prominent family, had been born in 1741, 9 years after George Washington. And unlike many wealthy and sophisticated men of his social class, he had decided not to go to college. Like many other men in Portsmouth, John chose to work in the very lucrative shipping trade, where he could sell goods up and down the East Coast. Eventually, he purchased his own fleet of vessels. In fact, if the British hadn't gotten in his way on the trade routes in the Atlantic, John Langdon might never have become one of the leaders on the American side of the Revolutionary War. But the British did get in the way. They started to charge American ships for passage on the Atlantic. And this made John irate because he was losing money. When he had a chance to ally himself with the Americans against the British, he jumped. There was exactly one military post in New Hampshire. It was called Fort William and Mary, and it was controlled by the British. It was full of gunpowder, cannons, and ammo. In 1774, John led a group of other men from Portsmouth in a military operation where they took over the fort, seizing all the gunpowder and ammunition. He became a hero for this daring, some would say reckless act. Soon, John was also a political leader, attending many of the big political events of the era. In 1776, he was part of the Second Continental Congress. This was the time when the U.S. officially declared war on England, and the only reason he did not sign the Declaration of Independence was because he left the Continental Congress early to fight with the New Hampshire militia. In 1787, John was in Philly at the Constitutional Convention, signing the new U.S. Constitution. So you can see he's not only a man to mean, he's a big man in America. After the war was over, he became the first president of the United States Senate. In 1796, when Ona arrived in Portsmouth, John was still serving as a U.S. Senator. John had met and worked with George Washington on many occasions. In November 1789, George wrote in his diary about visiting John in New Hampshire. Portsmouth, it is said, contains about 5,000 inhabitants. There are some good houses, among which Colonel Langdon's may be esteemed the first. And just by way of information, these rich plantocracy types, these new American nobility, so to speak, their rank typically in the army was a colonel. That was the lowest rank they would have. And it was hereditary. Their children could pick up the same rank. When the Langdons went to Philly, it made all the adults pleased when they watched their descendants play together. Elizabeth Langdon and Nellie Washington represented a new kind of American royalty. One, the daughter of a senator. The other, the granddaughter of the President of the USA. They grew up privileged, aware that because of who their father and grandfather were, a spotlight followed them around. Ona could remember the times in Philly when Maul had needed help, and Ona had had to join in with the caregiving of Nellie, perhaps serving Elizabeth and Nellie tea or accompanying them to a cultural event in Philly, even though Ona was only a few years older than those girls. More than anyone else in Portsmouth, it was Elizabeth Langdon, now 18, who scared Ona the most. She probably figured out where the Langdons lived and tried to stay as far away as she could. Ona learned her new city. She found the markets and the churches. She met with other free blacks, some of whom knew her, some of whom knew who she was, and some of whom just accepted her as a free woman, doing her best to get by just like they all were. Most of her time was spent working and learning the ropes of her new job. She started to walk taller, more proudly, as if she had never been enslaved. It was a performance that all fugitive slaves had to perfect. You couldn't act like you were scared of being caught when you were in public, but soon Ona began to feel more and more natural as she walked down Gardner Street and over to Walton Alley to get ingredients to make dinner. It felt good to be free, or at least to live freely. It felt good to keep her head up, not down. It felt good to be recognized by new friends. She may have been thinking about this on the day when she walked down the street and found her eyes landing on the person coming toward her from the other direction. None other than Elizabeth Langdon. Ona froze. Elizabeth Langdon may have smiled. Ona summoned all her personal strength and stopped herself from running away as fast as she could. Portsmouth was too small. There was no safe space for her to hide. Even more, she instantly realized that running would have been the worst possible reaction. She would cause a scene, drawing attention to herself. It was a surefire way to be caught. She took a deep breath and made a decision, one that probably felt staggeringly significant. For her entire life, she had learned how to hide her feelings, erasing anger from her face while it boiled in her heart, holding back tears while they flooded the wells of her eyes. But at this second, Ona knew she had to rely on her skill as an expert at being invisible. Lowering her head, she began to walk with purpose, avoiding Elizabeth's eyes and stepping past her without any kind of acknowledgement. Elizabeth Langdon would have been confused. As the daughter of the most prominent man in town, she would have learned to ignore the people who stared at her because of her family. But this was different. The face of the young black woman was so familiar. Elizabeth was certain she had seen her before, but where? Meanwhile, Ona continued to walk as her mind filled with images of ruin, each more awful than the last. Once again, she may have remembered the looks on those women from long ago, Lucy and Esther, the enslaved women who had fled to the British during the war, but who had returned skeletons of their former selves. Ona had to leave Portsmouth, but where could she go? Where would she hide? If she returned to her host home, the people who had put their own lives on the line in order to give her shelter, they could be arrested under the Fugitive Slave Act for hiding a fugitive. Yet, what else could she do? She had to tell her host. Maybe they could come up with a plan. She started to walk more quickly, thoughts racing her through her mind. Maybe Elizabeth hadn't recognized her. Wouldn't that be a kicker? Maybe Elizabeth wouldn't turn her in if she had. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Langdon had a million of her own thoughts racing through her mind. She had figured it out. The woman she had seen was indeed the slave who used to serve Martha Washington in Philly when Elizabeth would visit with her family. But what on earth was Ona doing in Portsmouth? And where was Mrs. Washington? Certainly she should be close at her heels, or something like that. Surely Elizabeth would have heard if the president and his family were in New Hampshire. For a moment, she second-guessed herself. The only other reason for Ona to be in Portsmouth was so unimaginable that it was absurd. Right. Elizabeth knew what she had to do. She had to tell her father. Ona, back at her host home, told them what had happened. She had probably calmed down. She couldn't stay hidden forever. If it hadn't been Elizabeth Langdon, it could have just as easily been Tobias Lear visiting his family in Portsmouth. Ona was living as a free woman, but she was living on borrowed time. This then was the cost. She would wait and see what happened. Elizabeth told her father that she had seen Ona on the streets of Portsmouth. Senator John Langdon must have been shocked that Ona was in his state, but he would not have been shocked that she had escaped. All of George's friends and acquaintances, indeed, people who didn't know George personally at all, had read that one of his slaves, a girl, had walked out of his home one evening and run away. John just hadn't expected her to land here in his own hometown. When Elizabeth heard about Ona's escape, she may have reacted like many other wealthy slave owners, asking, why would Ona escape at all? Weren't they treating her good down there? For people like the Langdons, it was difficult to accept that black people would even have the initiative and intelligence to risk escape. The Langdon family did not own any slaves in 1796, but they had owned them in the past, and like the Washingtons, the Langdons had been paternalistic owners who had considered themselves to be compassionate and generous. They thought they were different from the cruel slave owners, the people who used the whip as a torture device, as opposed to using it only to make sure their slaves did their jobs. Only. The Langdons had given their slaves more opportunities to do things on their own, more than the bare minimum of clothes and food. In short, in their minds, they had been very noble and caring for the ignoble savages, providing for people whom they believed to be incapable of caring for themselves. Ain't this about a twist? People that couldn't care for themselves. That sounds like somebody who needed somebody to brush their hair, carry their bags, drive their coach, and everything else. I think we got the case of the pot calling, of the chamber pot calling the tea kettle white. In truth, they were not noble nor caring. They had participated in a system that dehumanized other humans. It was an excuse to continue buying and selling other humans. It's possible that Senator Langdon and his daughter even spoke of Ona's ingratitude. How dare she escape? They knew that the Washingtons had offered pocket money to their slaves and allowed them to attend the theater. They knew that George, like the Langdons, had tried to keep slave families together. In their minds, George and Martha were some of the good owners, wise and well-mannered in the way of the good Southern families. Why would any slave run away, especially Ona, who had been Martha's favorite? Perhaps if Elizabeth Langdon had known of the plan for Ona to be given away to horrible Eliza Custis Law, she might have understood why Ona had felt she had to leave, but maybe not. Eliza was a terrible person, but there were a lot of terrible people. Why would that be enough for any slave to risk so much? It would have been impossible for Elizabeth Langdon or her father to understand what it was like to live as a slave. It was equally incomprehensible to people like them why Ona would want to free herself. Further, John Langdon was a senator of the USA, and he was obligated to follow the law. Ona Judge was a fugitive. The Washingtons owned her. To the Langdons, Ona was as much the property of the Washingtons as their dining room table or their horses were. Straight up. The president needed to be told immediately. John Langdon sat down to write a letter to his friend, the president. It took several days for the letter to reach Philly. The Washingtons had spent the summer at Mount Vernon and had only just returned to Philadelphia themselves. The letter was waiting for him on August 21st, 1796. George opened it. He now knew exactly where to find Ona Judge. And we'll end right there. Yes, I think that's a good place to end. And of course, we will be reading more from this story tomorrow night. As for our story about Emily Edmondson and her sister Mary, that one we're done with. But we're going to play a special tomorrow. We're going to put a special on. We're going to play a video that will give you some insights about Mount Vernon and what it was like to live at Mount Vernon from a different perspective. Okay? And then you can compare what we've been reading to these other perspectives that are out there. All right? And in the meantime, All you little children, you know what time it is. It's time to lay your little head on your little pillow, on your little bed, and close those your eyes, and wait for that sun to rise. And when you feel those sunbeams beaming down on your eyes, you know that right at that moment, it will be time for you to rise and shine, oh children of mine. We'll be black tomorrow, so look for us here at 9 o'clock EST. As for you adults, you already know. In order for us to be good to go, we need you to take it to the stage. I think that's a good one because that's Parliament Funkadelic, right? Another DC group. So we're all in DC this weekend. Go ahead and give us a like if you're looking at us on Facebook. If you're seeing us on the tube, give us a thumbs up. And then go ahead and subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel, whether you're on the tube or not. Go get on the tube if you're not and sign up over there. If you don't mind, we'd appreciate it very much. And while you're at it, go ahead and submit a recurring donation. You see the little button down there, you just click it and they'll make arrangements for you to make a recurring donation. If you did $1 a month for the next 12 months, that would be excellent because we need our income for our business, our nonprofit organization, Black Facts Educational Research Incorporated, to be on a solid economic footing so that we can continue purchasing books like this one and the other ones that you see behind me and continue sharing what's in the books freely with you. That's what we need to do. So if you love what we're doing, if you like what we're doing, if you can appreciate what you're doing, give us some support. I just gave you 4 different ways to support us. In the meantime, peace out, y'all. We're moving on, moving up. We hope you'll be moving with us.